This is the Real Digital Transformation podcast series, empowering technology and business professionals to succeed with digital transformation. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and series editor of the Pearson Digital Enterprise series, Thomas Earl.
Hi, this is Thomas Earl, and welcome to another episode of the Real Digital Transformation podcast series. I have with me today Evan Schwartz, best-selling author and Chief Innovations Officer for AMCS Group, as well as the adjunct professor at Jacksonville University. Welcome, Evan.
Hey, Thomas, how you doing? I'm happy to be here today.
Very good, thank you. So today we'll dive into the often hotly debated and controversial topic of ethics as they relate to AI, the application of AI, how organizations choose to incorporate it, and broader applications as well. It's something that I know that you've written about and talked about, so we're really interested in hearing your perspective of this. And let's just sort of begin in a broad sense. How do you view today the topic of ethics in AI, and what do you think the most important aspects of that are today for organizations and individuals to understand?
That's a great question. So we're seeing a lot of experimentation across businesses with AI. And typically when you see this kind of hesitation or this almost desperate need to get value from a tech, it's directly related to the sheer amount of investment it took to create it. So it's creating a pressure around needing to produce output without taking the appropriate time to identify how you can do it appropriately. So as I've gone through and looked, I teach and train on the development of AI, so I deeply understand what the technology is. And I think it comes from a misunderstanding of the tech, and the cost is why we see businesses trying to adopt it as a headcount reduction tool. And we spent the last year and a half, a lot of businesses running at this only to fail. And then we're now seeing it because it's a force multiplier where bad actors can leverage AI in a whole host of black hat type of digital crimes. It's accelerated the ability to do harm. And it's almost an imperative at this point where we, the collective we, step back out front, understand what our governance is, adopt a person plus AI strategy, recognize it is in fact a tool, and tools can be used for really good things, and tools can be used for really bad things. So the tech itself is a neutral construct, but we do need to start putting some governance rails around it. And what I'm demonstrating, and I often go around talking about, what we'll maybe talk about today, is if you put the right governance in place, you put the boundaries in place where you start your journey with AI with a better question than what can AI do, you replace that with what should AI do, it forces you to think more deeply about the application of the technology. And if you adopt a person plus AI strategy, not only will you be successful because the reduction in headcount isn't successful. We just spent a year and a half, MIT published papers, 95% fail or fail to return ROI. There's nothing wrong with the tech. What's wrong is our understanding of the tech and our application of the tech. And that's really where I want to kind of drive today, is just educating businesses how you can get real value out of this technology through a person plus AI strategy, and maybe get rid of some of the myth around the tech and how it should be applied in your business.
So ethics in relation to AI is about building a value system around how AI should and should not be utilized?
Particularly with the focus of how it impacts people. It's a people plus AI system. So if you put people at the front of that, then the ethical application of that still works. right? There still has to be value, right? I mean, the whole world can't run philanthropically. At some point, you have to produce value. So I do think a value-based ethical system where people are at the core of that governance model is where you're going to see the greatest lift. If we were to set AI aside, I'll give you a practical example that I think will clear it out. And I didn't invent this. Elon Musk threw this out there, and I think it's a great comparable because it grounds us in what I'm talking about without clouding with the AI thing. And I'm old enough to know I was around where there were skyscrapers of businesses were multi-floors of financial analysts, all cranking, adding machines, calculating, and running numbers to try to do projections and things for businesses. 3 to 4 floors on average for the large companies, just crunching numbers for their financial departments. And all of those floors of analysts were and could easily be beat today with a single analyst with the Excel tool, Microsoft Excel spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make Excel evil, right? That just gave that one person such a powerful tool to outperform floors of his peers or her peers. So to bring that analogy back to where AI is, AI opens up the ability to iterate over broader aspects of the flow driven by a single human. I call them stewards. I refer to it as the stewardship model. That is that bridge between the digital space and real life, enabling that person to produce incredible amounts of output, value output. But it's not a set and forget, right? Like the software systems of not even 10 years ago, you would buy them. They're for your company. They're largely baked with workflows and processes that your business would run, and you get them configured, you run them, people feed them data, and out the other end becomes the reports or the whatever it is, the value that you're trying to get out of them. The challenge with that is that you still had people driving the entire system, and we were the organic system that could tolerate the entropy of the world as it changes. AI is no different. It requires someone at the helm. It just can do so much more in that iterative process across that workflow. It has such a broad landscape. But you still need to keep the human there because what we take for granted, you walk into your office, there was an accident on the highway. We naturally adapt to the entropy and chaos of our world we don't have to build processes for it. But unfortunately, now to get and maintain the value out of AI, you're going to have to build processes for it. But AI can do so much good and so much bad. If you don't have a governance model, if you haven't sat down and said, these are the things that we're going to govern this tool with, it can get out of hand very quickly. Even something as simple as trying to collect aged receivables could get you in trouble with AI because AI is going to be creative in the way that it works. You're no longer doing the work component, you're driving the ask and allowing it to work out the tactical implementations, and it's seeking to achieve the objective. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean in the collections market of aged revenue? Something past 90 days. You're asking an AI model to produce a message, a communication of some kind, to be sent to someone in the pursuit of collecting a debt. So we're now asking AI to be manipulative because that's what that activity does, to conclude some kind of a link to collect that debt. If you don't have any kind of governance, if there's nothing that sets what's inbounds or out of bounds, the AI is going to attempt to complete that task by whatever means it has available to it to do so. And that's where the governance becomes very important
And
in that.
so, within a governance framework for AI systems operating within a given environment, ethics come in as a means of establishing functional parameters around those AI systems to limit what they can and cannot do. I-
Correct.
and then, I guess, um, in addition to guardrails like that to contain what AI systems cannot do so that they do not overreach within a broader governance framework. What other ethical considerations are there that organizations should be thinking about or planning for? Is it, um, the type of processes or workflows or scenarios that AI should even be considered for, or how AI models should or should not be trained with certain types of data? In your experience now, because ethics has been discussed for a while now in relation to AI adoption and AI emergence, but now that organizations are doing so much experimentation and automation with AI, successful or not, what have you seen as the most important ethical concerns or issues that have come about?
So if your governance model is grounded, say, in the EU AI Act has given some parameters, the NIST framework gives you some strong parameters, but what's important is to understand the risks of the models that you're using, the LLMs that are driving the intelligence. And you were kind of dancing around this a bit. So the reality is every single model is going to have baked into it some kind of biases. Those biases are going to be translated into risks. Now, as morals and ethics are becoming increasingly more important and governance models are increasingly more important, almost all the model builders today will give you at least a baseline of a risk profile. How did it score against various biases? Was it biased more towards men versus women? Was it biased towards a certain race in certain categories than another? Was it biased towards certain age categories and so on? Biases are intrinsic to data based on the way that you fed the data and trained the model. There's just no getting out of it. It is extremely difficult to create a completely unbiased model. And if you have an appropriately sound governance and you've put in your guardrails, you can also have quality control that would allow you to run a variety of tests on the other side to validate that the decisions being made don't include a variety of biases, even some cognitive dissonance type of decisions. Because again, where humans are being relegated into the stewardship model, we're really, and I don't like this term, but without you having a very clear picture of it, babysitter is almost suitable. You're going to be managing potentially thousands of agents within your domain space as a steward. And you could be running across maybe dozens or more different models, LLMs, different parameters. All of those require a risk profile for biases and decision making because it is the agents and the LLMs beneath them that are running the tactical execution of the task that you've given it. As a steward, you provide the prompt. Your prompt could be a source of biases, right? So now you got to look at the way you're asking those questions. And then there's context. AI without context is going to look into its own LLM for context. And that's not unusual, right? We as humans, if I'm not given all the data for a task, I rely on my experience as a human. I've done this sort of work and I was asked by my boss to go do this thing, and I've been doing this job for 30 years. My boss, she doesn't have to tell me every single thing to do because I have experience. Agents and LLMs are the same way. And that's where you get the hallucinations. If you don't provide the key or the important context, the data, it'll reach into its LLM, but I tell people AI knows everything about business, but nothing about your business. So if you're leaving some gaps for interpretation, it's going to the global world database of information to get a piece of data it needs to complete a task, and it could be way off the mark. So that quality check on the other side is an important role for that steward. Otherwise, you're guaranteed to get hallucinations, you're guaranteed to get unexpected biases. It's going to provide less accurate results. If one might argue, once you take it out of the POC in the lab and you put it into the real world, it becomes almost unscalable.
Mm-hmm. So is bias management a key ethics responsibility that organizations need to carry out on a regular basis?
Yeah, if you don't have a registry, so most of the NIST and if you're looking for ISO 42001 as a compliance standard, you would have to keep a registry of all the AI tools along with the models that they depend upon that clearly outlines the biases and risks. You are then able, as an organization, to take steps to mitigate those risks by the way that you prompt and the way that you provide the context. And then you have to monitor through observability and traceability the activities of the model that you're using or the agent that you're using to assess how well it's behaving and how well it's staying ethical within those bias risks. You're going to have to mitigate them as a good steward or a good owner of that tool. So
Mm-hmm.
to get the value out of that AI, you can't just assume that that's been done. It's your responsibility. So accountability is important. Even in JU, we've taken on it's kind of like the calculator. We've agreed to allow the students to start leveraging these tools and models, but we've made it very clear as part of the ethical policy, while you can use these tools and you must cite that you have used these tools, you are 100% responsible and accountable for the work that you provide or output. So if it is wrong, if it's hallucinated, if it has created a bias or an error, you are held accountable for it. And that has created a very healthy moral ethical framework for the use of these tools.
Okay. And in terms of ethics in AI-enabled environments, they apply to the AI systems, but presumably they also apply to the stewards of those systems, so that there may be new ethical guidelines or rules that humans need to follow in relation to the maintenance or administration or governance of AI systems, but also, I suppose, in terms of deciding how and when they should be deployed. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, and in fact, that really comes back to the crux of before you use AI, you should be asking the question, what should AI do? That should be part and parcel to your governance framework.
Mm-hmm.
It should not put it anywhere and everywhere. I think I could get some value out of the AI. There should be clear boundaries under which you're going to leverage AI within your organization. And that application of it has to have clear use cases. And it's the use case is where you get to test the human component of this. Um, so taking it back a year, there was a heavy drive. It was largely driven by private equity to get AI into your organization for the purpose of headcount reduction, right? So that on its surface, if you would have built a governance model, person plus AI, implemented AI for that purpose and just laid it out from a use case end to end, it would have felt amoral on its surface. Now, I galvanize this statement to businesses by going, look, you have every right to right size your business, but don't implement a tool whose very nature is asymmetric growth, and you're targeting a fraction of capability. I mean, your stated ROI objective is headcount reduction from the 100% consumption I do now to some lesser portion of that is your entire motivation. That makes zero sense. Just put ethical and moral framework aside because it's completely immoral, but the reality of it is it doesn't even make good business sense. I've got a tool that offers asymmetric growth, and I'm not targeting a metric for growth. Now, at the end of the day, if you've grown as far as you can grow, by all means, right size your business. That is a good business decision. But you make that business decision because you have either grown as far as you can, or you do not see a way to grow anymore within the markets with which you operate in. But to apply a technology for the sole purpose of headcount reduction with no real way to monitor the systems that you're putting in place, it's no wonder they're failing. It would be almost obvious that they're failing. And that's, to me, that's where I think there's a winning message, because there's a strong link between a moral and ethical governance framework and the value that the tool provides. If you go too far off rails and you implement without the governance framework, you're almost certainly not going to receive the value. So there's almost a baked-in incentive to do the right thing. Now, as you pointed out, and we can do this today, the human stewards that are driving these models could be in themselves heavily biased, heavily amoral. We live with that risk today. Humans run businesses today, humans operate and they do terrible things. And we need to rely on laws and morals within the society to drive that behavior. We haven't really fixed it across all of
Right.
humanity. So I'm not going to fix that with AI. It will be amplified with it, but I think if we do the same thing from a corporate perspective that I've done at Jacksonville University, which is, yeah, you can use the tool. Yes, you can get a lot more done. And in fact, we've seen it in two exact instances where the students have produced incredible amounts, completing entire capstones rather than multi-year capstones. They're completing them in months. So we know that the value's there, but we're holding them accountable for all of that output. And that
Um,
accountability is the critical component.
right. I can definitely see how that is extremely effective and a valuable insight, and something I think a lot of organizations still need to better realize. Before we conclude, I just had one more question going back to when you were discussing bias within the data that models are trained on and how it's often simply unavoidable. Based on your experience, once a steward or the organization itself realizes that an AI system they have in place that's in production, that they have formed dependencies on, that there is a form of undesirable bias that has been revealed within the model, what is the common reaction to that? Is it that they have the model retrained, that they cleanse the data or find new data to better train the model, or do they rely on filtering mechanisms to detect bias in the output data and to perhaps reject certain outputs or filter them before they are further streamed to wherever they're going?
So there's three ways to deal with this, and it depends on how deep. It depends on a variety of factors. So the first method, let's assume that you built the model off of your corporate data. So you trained it. And then you discover there are biases and various risks associated with your model based on the data. The right answer would be then to go back in and retrain the data. You can rework the data. You can manage the synthetic data creation better. That is an actual faster solution and less expensive than adding mitigation to it. If you are using a vendor's large foundational model and you don't even have the ability to retrain it, but it is the only model that you have found in the market capable of performing the services that you need, then you're going to have a governance layer that is includes mitigation activity, either through the prompt, through the context of the data, or you will have to put a governor model, which is a new model that reviews and mitigates the output. And you can even put that into sort of a minority report style. Now that's going to add cost because now I've got three models producing a similar output, and then I'm looking for a minority report versus a majority report, making a decision as to which action I go with. That means I've almost tripled my cost with that. But if you have no other way to deal with it, that becomes the only approach to you. Then the second one is I'm wholly dependent on a third party model, but this isn't the only one powerful enough to do what I need to do, and I can go to market. The good news is over the last few years, these agentic systems have become very plug and play. The plumbing in which the agent runs, I can unplug a model, an LLM, and plug in another into that same plumbing, and I just get a different brain and I can rerun my tests and get something less biased, less risky. I can plug and play my data. If it's some of my MCP data or my graph or vector data that I'm plugging in, I can fix that and plug it back into my agentic system and get a better outcome. And there's a lot of governance rails that you can build around it. So the three models are, if it's yours and you built it, find out where the problem is in the data, cleanse the data, and retrain it, because that is absolutely the fastest. It'll be cheaper upstream, adds a little cost at the front end, but your mitigation practices and your outcomes will be better. If it's a foundation model that you depend on, you can't retrain, and there's no alternatives in the market, then you're going to have to use, and there's numerous ones, there's several coming out, but there are mitigation pathways on both input and output that you can put around the use of that tool to manage and mitigate those biases and risks. And then, of course, the third one is if you find a really bad model, but you have alternatives in the market, unplug that model, go get one of the other alternatives, plug that in, and then run your tests and get it to something that isn't as expensive to manage, but can stay within your governance framework.
Super. That's incredibly useful information and something I think organizations need to have in their project plans before they even begin the process of adopting and incorporating AI technologies to just, be prepared for potential bias and have a means of dealing with it once it does emerge. So thank you. Those are really good insights and really good considerations. Before we conclude, Evan, please tell us more about the books you've written and your work at AMCS Group and Jacksonville.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm the author of People, Places, and Things, and I put people at the top of that journey intentionally. So People, Places, and Things teaches companies how to adopt technology. It's 35 years of my narratives and story. There is a more detailed supplemental package, 750 pages, that really gets into the details of how is the best and right way to adopt digital technology, whether it's AI or even just an ERP system. The failure rates of these OCM, organizational change managements, is extremely high. So my hope and dream was this book and the knowledge in it would help companies avoid these very expensive write-downs. At Jacksonville University, I teach the technical project management. I teach AI development and data deep neural networks, construction and learning. And I teach advanced architecture, solid architectural principles. All of those have a very strong AI theme through them. How does AI help you implement projects within your company better? Building and constructing models, I think, should become fundamental to most graduates, particularly in the computer science and cybersecurity, so you understand how they work and think. And then the architecture, solid architectural principles, while it's a technical class that wants to answer if AI is doing all of our coding, where do our software architects come from? Because before AI, an architect had to hand jam out hundreds of thousands of lines of code to become an architect. It really is answering a bigger question of how do we stop from hollowing out the progression of certain professional roles? If AI is doing all of the lawyers' thinking, how do we get those advanced lawyers to be the stewards? If I'm got AI doing all the coding, where do we get the architects that are designing the next generation platforms and solutions? So the good news is there's an answer, and it will work across every field, across every profession. And we don't have to hollow out these fields. I can still grow architects. I'm no longer doing that tactile, specific, deep task, but I do need to know the fundamentals and what good looks like. There was a story where a photographer who does pictures for a museum took a selfie of himself. This is widely known. It's almost a meme now across social media. And it was just a regular picture of him in a t-shirt, and he gave it this direction, and it produced this stunning emotional work of art, contrast, light and dark, water dripping off his face, a stern look. You could see this portrait in a museum. And he thought, my God, I'm out of a job. And then after only about an hour of reflecting on it, he realized the only thing that changed was the camera. He still had to describe to AI the lens size, the lighting effects, how the box lighting would be set up, the pool, the way that the thing looked, using artistic terms. And very similarly to how you and I might pick up our cell phone and go, I need to dial this guy. No one's dialed a phone in decades, but we still use the term, and we do know that the outcome of dialing is calling someone. Well, while no one's really going to pick up a camera and put on a 35 millimeter lens or a wide angle, we're going to know what those fundamentals mean by the virtue of their output. And architects and software are going to know the same thing because they're going to know what solid architectural principles are from fundamentals, and they're going to know what good looks like, even though AI did all of the work in the middle. So we're not going to hollow out our professions. We're going to teach differently. We're going to move away from this elementary training of repetitive excellence that has really been burdening humans' creativity for hundreds of years. And we're moving into a new age of humanity where we get to be brave again. We get to be fearless, and we can try things with a high iterative rate. Even if it's failure, the cost of failure is so low, we get to try things that we might not have tried. And I know we're short on time, but if you go and you look up the IFTP, the Invent for the Planet, it was a great exercise where we put a bunch of teams together to solve world hunger and food waste. Friday night, they got the problem. Sunday morning, with the use of AI, they had a working app that I think would have actually helped and moved the needle, because it's almost embarrassing the fact that anyone in this world goes hungry when you look at the sheer amount of food waste hits around 40%. And to see a team of students be able to solve that with AI gives me considerable hope for the future. I'm not buying into this dystopian world where nobody has a job and everyone's relegated to universal basic income.
Well, maybe just the unethical people.
Very touche. Well,
Evan, thank you so much for your time today. Very insightful and inspiring. Hopefully we can connect again in the future and just see where things are at in relation to AI adoption, ethics, and overall governance and the direction of it. But thanks again for joining us today.
I appreciate it, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Follow Thomas on LinkedIn